I think one of the most valuable things I ever learned running especially food stores, how to make really easy desserts. If it took me all day to make a dessert, I wouldn't have anything to sell. And this easy cranberry and apple cake is one of the greatest ideas for that. I'm going to make a base with cranberries and Granny Smith apples, sort of that sweet and tart thing together. And then I'm going to put a batter over the whole thing and just throw it in the oven. It's as easy as it gets. Cranberries are really tart, and it's really nice to have something a little sweet to go with it. I'm just going to throw this in a big bowl. The other thing about a Granny Smith apple is it has lots of pectin in it. And when this cooks with the cranberries, it's going to make a nice sort of thick gel. Okay, that's one Granny Smith apple chopped up. Next thing I need is 12 ounces of cranberries. And actually, you can only get them sometime of the year in the fall. And so what I do is I buy lots of bags of them, and I freeze them, and they freeze perfectly. You would never know that they've been frozen. Half a cup of brown sugar. 1 tablespoon of grated orange zest. I always say this, the zest has more flavor than the juice, so I always make sure to use it. It should be about half the orange. I can already smell it. And I think I'm going to do the juice also. So about 1/4 cup of freshly squeezed orange juice right into it. And that's going to allow the juices from the cranberry and the juices from the apple to sort of meld together. That should be about 1/4 cup. Next is cinnamon, about 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. This actually has cinnamon in the fruit and also in the topping. So I'm just going to mix this together, and then I'm going to make this delicious, almost like a pancake batter that goes right on top. Smells good so far. Okay, into the pan. So I'm just using this fluted pan, but you can use a glass pan, any kind of a 10-inch round pan. Works perfectly. Okay, next the batter that goes on top of all that gorgeous fruit. Okay, first I need 2 eggs. I'm going to whip that on medium-high speed for about 2 minutes. I really love easy recipes because no matter what anybody says, entertaining's hard. When I say easy recipes, I don't mean like 3 ingredients you just throw together. What I mean is something that's really no stress, that you can do, you know it's going to come out perfectly every time, and that's what I consider easy. And that's just what this recipe is. So I'm just going to turn the mixer down to medium. I'm going to add a cup of sugar. 1/4 pound of butter that's been melted and cooled. That just makes it really easy to mix in. When you're cooking, the measuring is not quite as important. When you're baking, it has to be absolutely precise. A teaspoon of vanilla. I love good vanilla. A little bit of sour cream, 1/4 cup, just to give it some richness. Okay, just mix it until it's smooth. That looks gorgeous. Okay, next I need flour. So I need a cup of flour. Just lighten it and then just scoop it until it's over the cup and then level it off. And that'll come out accurately every time. So on low speed, just slowly add the flour while it mixes in. And then you won't get any lumps. Last thing, salt. I need 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Really brings out the flavor of the vanilla. Okay, that's it. You don't want to overmix it once the flour's in, because then it makes it tough. It'll be like bread. You want to just treat it really gently. What I do is give it a last stir with a spatula. Okay. So I'm just going to pour the batter right on top of the fruit. This is actually something between a pie and a cake. It's got a lot of fruit in the bottom and a little batter on the top, and you don't have to make pie crust. That works for me. Just make sure most of the fruit is covered. So I'm going to do a little cinnamon and sugar on top. So I need a tablespoon of sugar. Just going to mix them together. And just about 1/8 teaspoon of cinnamon. Now, if you use too much cinnamon, it has sort of a burnt taste, and it actually looks burnt. So you don't want to use too much, just enough to give it enough flavor. So just put those together. And then I'm going to sprinkle it right on top. It's going to give the batter lots of flavor. I'll just sprinkle it lightly all over the top. Perfect. Into the oven, 325 degrees for about 55 to 60 minutes, and that's really easy, cranberry and apple cake. Cake smells done. So good. Oh, this smells so delicious. So I just want to make sure it's done. You can sort of tap the top and feel that it is. But the only way to really know for sure is a toothpick. So toothpick in the middle. The fruit's going to be wet. You just want to make sure the batter's done. And it is. It comes out clean. Perfect. I do this really informally. Wait till you see the cranberries and apples on the bottom of it. It's really like a pudding. You can serve it warm at room temperature, but hot is even better. Oh, who wouldn't want that for dessert? When I was at the farm stand and I saw all these gorgeous pears and apples, I thought, I've definitely got to make a pear and apple crisp for my barn warming. So I've got 2 pounds of cookin apples. I've peeled them and diced them. And I've got 2 pounds of Bosc pears. You can really choose any kind of apples that are firm and crisp. And you want pears that are firm also, but also sort of juicy. You can see when I peel them, they're just delicious. So peel them, and then I'm going to cut them in 3/4 inch dice. Take the cores out. It's a little bit of a messy job, but worth it. Okay, so that's 2 pounds of apples and 2 pounds of pears. And I'm going to add cranberries, 3/4 cup of cranberries. They're dried cranberries, and I think they're really sort of autumnal and delicious in this. Now to give it lots of flavor, I'm going to put in lemon zest and orange zest. About a teaspoon of lemon zest. A teaspoon of orange zest. I like to mix them because one's a little sweeter, one's a little tartar, and this way neither of them really overwhelm the pear flavor. And then some juice. I always want a little juice to mix with the flour and sugar, so it gives a nice sort of sauce when it's cooking. So about 2 teaspoons of orange juice, about 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. Okay. 1/2 cup of sugar, 1/4 cup of flour. That's just going to sort of create that little, you know, that delicious goop in the middle. So when the juices of the pears and apples come out, it'll make a wonderful sauce for it. Okay, now some classic apple pie flavorings. A teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg. So all of these enhance the pears and the apples, but none of them really overwhelm it. Just to bring out all that sort of gorgeous pear and appleness. Okay, so I think I'm going to fill the ramekins. So I have 12 small ramekins. They're each an individual crisp. And I think this is going to be just delicious. I want to fill them each a little high, because when they bake, you know, they sort of go down. So it's about 1 cup in each one. And now for the oatmeal crumble topping. Okay, 1½ cups of flour, 3/4 cup of light brown sugar, and 3/4 cup of granulated sugar. Okay, 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Salt's really important when you bake, really brings out the flavor. And 1 cup of oatmeal. Has great crunch and flavor. 1/2 pound of butter. I'm just going to dice it and then mix it into the topping. Okay, and then I'm just going to blend it all together. So you want to let this go until it's like in big crumbles, which is right now. It's great. You can smell the cinnamon and nutmeg. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm just going to pile this on each of the ramekins. Just big crumbles on the top of each one. Now, how good does that look? So I'm going to put these in the fridge, and then later before the party, I'm going to bake them 350 degrees for about 45 to 50 minutes until the top is browned and the juice and the fruit is all bubbly. Will you take a crisp and I'll get you a spoon?
You know, it's very good.
My apple pie bars are kind of a mashup between apple pie and shortbread bars. So I've got 1 pound of butter. Okay, the next thing is 3/4 cup of sugar. 1/2 cup of brown sugar. I use light brown sugar. 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Now, the really important thing here is that the butter is at room temperature. So when you mix it, it gets nice and light and fluffy, and then you can add the other ingredients. You want to start it slow, and then gradually increase it. And what I've done is sift together 4 cups of flour, it's all-purpose flour, and 1½ teaspoons of kosher salt. I sifted them to make sure that they got really well combined. And now I'm just gonna add them slowly to the mixture. And what I do is I turn the mixture down low, and rather than dump the whole thing in, which means it probably won't mix in well, I'm just gonna do this slowly. Okay. Perfect. So this is really what you want it to look like. You want it to be soft and light and fluffy, but it will also hold together. And so if it doesn't do that, just add a teaspoon of water. First, I grease the bottom so it'll stick. And I want to be able to lift this whole thing out when I'm done. So I put parchment paper in, but I don't want it to fall into the pan. So I just take little metal clips, make sure there's no plastic on it, and just clip this piece of parchment paper right to the pan. Voila. So now I've got the shortbread dough, and I'm gonna put 2/3 of it in the bottom of the pan. And then with floured hands, which is the best way to spread this out, I'm just gonna spread it out into the pan. So I just want an even layer. This is my little trick. I take a metal baking cup and I flour the bottom. And so with a cup, you can kind of press it into the corner. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna refrigerate this for 20 minutes, then I'm gonna bake it 375 for about 18 to 20 minutes until it's golden brown and delicious. And then I'm gonna cool it. Happily, I've got one already done. How good does that look? It's incredible. I combined 1½ pounds each of sliced Granny Smith apples and golden delicious apples. I added 2 tablespoons of freshly squeezed lemon juice to stop the apples from browning, 1/4 cup of granulated sugar, then some classic apple pie spices, a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1/8 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, and mixed it all together. Then I added the apples to a pot containing 4 tablespoons of melted butter and let it simmer for 15 minutes, just until the apples were tender. That was pretty easy, right? Okay, so what I'm gonna do with the apples is I'm gonna spread them out on the shortbread crust. So there's just a little bit like a 1/2 inch border around the edge. Okay, so that's it for the apples. So I have 1/3 of the shortbread left in the mixer. I'm just gonna add a few things to give it even more flavor and crunch. So 1/2 cup of chopped walnuts, a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, the mixer back on, just enough on a low speed just to get it all mixed together. Okay, last a little bit. How good does this look? Okay, next I'm gonna show you how I bake, cut, and serve the bars. The pan goes into a 375-degree oven for 25 to 30 minutes. Then when the time's up and the topping is browned, I'll take them out and let them cool completely. Then use the parchment to lift the slab out of the pan onto a board. Slide the paper out, then cut it into 12 squares with a large, sharp knife. I just serve the bars right on the cutting board. I love the way it looks. So that's apple pie bars. Apple pie in the form of a bar. Who wouldn't want to eat that? I do. So for dessert, I'm gonna make an apple cake tatin, which is a very simple version of a French apple tatin. So first I'm gonna make caramel, which is a cup of sugar, 1/3 cup of water, and I'm just gonna cook it. I need a candy thermometer to make sure I don't overcook it, until it's sort of brown and caramelized, about 360 degrees on a candy thermometer. Excellent. Okay, the next thing is the apples. So just cut the apples, cut out the core, and cut them in wedges. And I think for this, probably 3 wedges, so you'll have 12 wedges per apple. Okay, just take the apples and put them in a greased pan. A glass 9-inch pie pan is perfect. You can find one in the hardware store. And just run the apples around the outside. And then when you turn it over, all those caramelized apples are gonna show. It's gonna be great. Just 3 right there. You wanna get them in tight. Okay, now for the gorgeous syrup. Smell, it smells great. I'm just gonna pour it right over the apples. Now I'm going to make a sour cream cake dough on top and bake the whole thing together. It's going to be so good. So it's a really simple cake. 6 tablespoons of butter. 3/4 cup of sugar. Just cream that together. Two eggs. Okay, next ingredients are 1/3 cup of sour cream. Okay, 1/2 teaspoon of lemon zest. 1/2 teaspoon of good vanilla extract. And mix it all up. So now for the dry ingredients. I need a cup plus 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. I need a 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm just going to sift these all together. And that way, if there's a little piece of flour or something in the bottom, you can either sieve it or just take it out. So make sure that you really have smooth, dry ingredients. So with the mixer on low, I'm just going to slowly add the dry ingredients. Okay, now just take the batter and just spread it out over the apples and the caramel. And it's going to be puffed and golden and just gorgeous when you turn it out upside down. Spread it out smoothly on top of the caramel and the apples. And then I'm going to bake it 350 degrees for about 30 to 40 minutes until the cake is done and a cake tester comes out clean. So this is the hard part, is turning it out. It's caramelized apples on the bottom and a nice light cake on the top. So wish me luck. Oh, look how great that looks. Wow. So you just have to loosen it a little bit. And I think I did it. Wow, that's really great. Okay, and a little bit of powdered sugar on the top. And I think that's perfect for housewarming at Valerie's. My fresh apple spice cake is amazing, but it's the rum-soaked raisins that put it right over the top. So I'm starting with raisins, 1 cup of raisins. And instead of regular raisins, I'm using golden raisins. I think they're a little sweeter and they're gonna look great in the cake. I'm adding 1/2 cup of dark rum, and I use dark rum instead of regular white rum because it's got sort of like a caramelly flavor, and it'll be great with the apples. I'm gonna pour it over the raisins. Now what I'm going to do to make them all taste better, I'm going to microwave them so the raisins plump up and the rum gets into the raisins. 60 seconds. Okay, let's make the cake. So the cake starts with 1 cup of sugar, granulated sugar, and 1 cup of dark brown sugar. 3 eggs, extra large eggs, and instead of butter, I'm using oil because it keeps it really moist. 3/4 cup of vegetable oil. You want some kind of flavorless oil for this. Okay, 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Of course, I love vanilla. And 2 teaspoons of freshly grated orange zest. Just think of all these, raisins are ready. Just think how all these flavors are so delicious together with apple. Okay, then turn this on and beat it for about 3 minutes until it's light and fluffy. Okay, next the dry ingredients. So I've got a bowl and a sifter. I always like to do the dry ingredients in a sifter. 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. The sifter is a great way to mix everything and make sure it's really smooth. 2 teaspoons of baking powder. 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, really good cinnamon. Okay, 1/2 teaspoon of ground nutmeg. 1/2 teaspoon of ground ginger. Next is cloves. Cloves are really strong, so I'm just going to do 1/8 teaspoon, just a little bit, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Okay, so that's the flour and the spices. I'm just going to sift them all together. This smells great. And see, anything that's in the sifter, just want to make sure it goes through. Okay, so now I'm just going to turn this to low and just very slowly add the dry ingredients to the wet ingredients. When I had Barefoot Contessa, we used to have all kinds of cakes like this out on the bakery counter. And you could come and buy a whole cake, but you could also buy a piece. It's not fancy, just really delicious and earthy. And you always want to come back for more. Okay, that's the dry ingredients. Now I'm just going to give it a big stir with a spatula just to make sure it's really well mixed from the bottom and the sides. Now I'm going to add some really good stuff. First, the raisins, and I have to drain them. The smell of the raisins in the rum is fantastic. So I'm just going to drain the raisins. Next, I have some pecans that I've toasted. It's 1 cup of pecans, chopped. I just toasted them for about 5 to 10 minutes, 350 degrees, just to crisp them up and bring out the flavor. I want everything to taste as good as it can possibly be. And then 1.5 pounds of Granny Smith apples that have been peeled, cored, and 1/4 inch diced. So I'm just going to fold these together. Make sure everything's really well folded in, because you want every bite to have raisins, pecans, and apples in it. And the good thing is, you can make it ahead. It only gets better. Okay, so instead of making a round cake or a loaf cake, I'm gonna make a rectangular cake. And this pan, I've greased it, I've put parchment paper in, and then greased and floured the pan. I wanna make sure it comes out of the pan. I'm just gonna pour the whole batter in. Look how good this looks. Isn't that crazy? You can really see how all the flavors of the raisins and the apples and pecans are gonna make this fantastic. Okay, I'm just gonna spread this out. Look how thick it is. I have to say I can smell the rum. Okay, ready for the oven. I'm gonna bake the cake at 350 degrees for 35 minutes. When the time's up, I'll take it out, let it cool in the pan, then I'll flip it out onto my hand, carefully remove the parchment paper, place it on a board, and cut it in big squares. That looks amazing, doesn't it? And with a cup of tea in the afternoon, it's a perfect snack. But if you want to make a great dessert out of it, I'll show you what I do. So I'm going to take a piece of the cake, put it on a big plate, a little more dramatic. Some vanilla ice cream. I actually took it out of the freezer, put it into the fridge for about 30 minutes so it's nice and softened. And not to leave well enough alone, I have some warm caramel sauce, store-bought. You don't have to make your own caramel sauce. And a drizzle of caramel sauce on the cake and the plate. Very restaurant style, but so easy to do. And I would say that's a dessert that everybody is going to be very happy to try, including me. I may have to try it just to make sure it's good. How great is that? Love all the flavors and the textures. Cold ice cream, warm cake, caramel sauce. No, that's my kind of dessert. So good. I don't think there's a French pastry shop or a French bistro that doesn't serve an apple tart. And the truth is, it's a really simple thing. It's just pastry, apples, butter, and sugar. And it is my all-time favorite dessert. So I've got 4 apples here. They're Granny Smith apples. For small pastries, I like to use small ones. And I'm just slicing them really thinly. I'll show you the pastry. So what I use is puff pastry, frozen puff pastry you buy in the grocery store. And I leave it in the fridge so it's nice and cold when I'm working with it. Didn't roll it out, didn't do a thing, just cut it in quarters. So take the apples and just arrange them really neatly, overlapping slices, right onto the tart. This is why it's important, if you're making small tarts, you want small green apples. Because otherwise they're too big to fit on. Just one right here and one right there. And once I've got all the apples on, I'm gonna sprinkle it with sugar and dot it with butter and put it in the oven. And it's gonna be so delicious. Of course, you can make your own pastry, but with puff pastry, it's so fantastic. Why would you bother? So I'm just gonna sprinkle these with about 3/4 cup of sugar. I very often make this in one large tart, but it's so much more special when it's smaller tarts. Everybody gets their own. Just sprinkle it on as evenly as you can. And what's gonna happen is these bake at a high temperature and the sugar just caramelizes, gets sweet and golden brown. So good. So I have 6 tablespoons of butter. I'm just gonna cut it in little pieces and then just dot the apple tarts with that. And how French is this? This is just such a classic French bistro dish. So little bits of butter on the top, and that's gonna mix with the sugar and it'll just caramelize the apples. And the best part is the house smells so good when you make this. Okay, into the oven, 400 degrees for about 40 minutes, and they're gonna come out caramelized and brown and so delicious. And now all I have to do is make a really simple apricot glaze. This glaze couldn't be simpler. Put 3/4 cup of apricot jelly into a small pan. Add 3 tablespoons of Calvados, or you can use water if you like. Just stir them together and heat it up until it's bubbly. When the apple tarts are beautifully browned, take them out of the oven and then brush them all over with this glaze. It's gonna make them shiny and luscious looking. So I've got the apples, they look gorgeous from the farm, and now I'm just gonna make pie crust. I don't know why, but I think people find pie crust more daunting than anything else that we make. I'm going to show you the secret of really good pie crust, and it's about very cold ingredients. So I'm going to start with 3 cups of flour, just regular all-purpose flour. A tablespoon of sugar. And 1 teaspoon of salt. I use kosher salt. Now for the shortening. There are all kinds of debates about what kind of shortening to use for pie crust, but I actually combine vegetable shortening, and I do it very cold. It comes out of the refrigerator. And butter. And then you get all of the flakiness of the vegetable shortening and all the flavor of the butter. So that's 1/3 cup of vegetable shortening, and I have 1½ sticks of cold butter that I've diced, and I actually put it back in the refrigerator until I was ready, so it's really cold. Put that right in. And now comes the critical part. What you want in the dough is little bits of butter and shortening through the dough. You don't want it totally pureed. And that's what makes it flaky. When the heat from the oven hits the butter, it causes steam to evaporate, and that's what makes it really flaky. So when you're doing this, make sure it's not totally pureed in the flour. I'm just gonna pulse this about 8 times until it's like the size of peas. Maybe 10 times. So you can still see bits of butter and shortening in the flour, and that's what's going to make really flaky pastry. I'm going to do maybe 1 more pulse. Okay, so the next thing is ice water, and I need about 8 tablespoons, which is about 1/2 cup. So I'm going to pour out the ice. Excellent. So I'm going to turn this on and just let it go around until it forms a ball. Okay, we're there. So now I'm going to refrigerate it for about 30 minutes. It's a really important part of making good pie pastry. Okay, now for the filling. Deep dish apple pie. 4 pounds of apples cut up in big chunks, and I'm going to flavor it with a little bit of orange zest and lemon zest. 1 tablespoon of orange juice. And 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. This not only flavors it, but it keeps the apples from turning brown. 1/2 cup of sugar. It all depends on how sweet the apples are. These are pretty tart. 1/4 cup of flour. And a teaspoon of salt. Okay, now for the spices. 3/4 teaspoon of good cinnamon. 1/2 teaspoon of good nutmeg. I love the way it smells. It smells like apple pie spices already. Okay, 1/8 teaspoon of allspice, which is really a pinch. And then I'm just going to mix it all up. And then right into the crust. This is a lot of apples for this pie crust, but I like it when it's piled high. Mile high apple pie. Okay, now for the top crust. Ready for the pie. Roll it up on the rolling pin. And and roll it really gently over the apples. There's so many different ways to crimp a pie. I think everybody likes to do it the way their mother did it. But what I like to do is just roll the top crust underneath the bottom one. I want to make this really old-fashioned looking. Okay, once that's done, you can either crimp it with a fork. Crimping is about keeping the two crusts together so it seals in the juices. Or you can do it with your fingers. I think I'll do it with my fingers. Okay, crimped. Now, I'm going to do an egg wash. It's going to make the crust really nice and brown, which is 1 egg beaten with about a tablespoon of water or milk or whatever you have. Just brush the whole top. Okay, a little bit of sugar, make it nice and shiny. And then just a few holes in the top to let the steam escape so the crust gets nice and crisp. Sort of old-fashioned. Okay, into the oven, 400 degrees for about an hour and 15 minutes. Now that's an apple pie. And my favorite part is it makes the house smell fabulous. Because the apples are wonderful in the orchard, I'm gonna make an apple crisp with really good vanilla ice cream. It's 5 pounds of apples. It sounds like a lot, but they really cook down. And you want a big, high apple crisp. Okay, that's the apples, and now I'm just gonna flavor them. So I love to use citrus with apples. So I'm gonna use the zest and the juice of 1 orange and 1 lemon. So, lots of orange zest. You always want to zest the orange before you juice it, otherwise you won't be able to zest it. And some juice. And then 1 lemon, also the zest and the juice. I love the spice of lemon. And then the juice. Okay. Want it a little bit sweet, but not too sweet. 1/2 cup of sugar. A little bit of cinnamon. Not too much, because it can really overpower it. A little bit of nutmeg, because I love it. And then clean hands. Just toss it all together. I just want it piled really high. Okay, and you want to get all the juices in because that's all going to bake into the apples. So for the topping, I want it to have lots of flavor and lots of crunch. So this is what I'm going to do. Take 1.5 cups of flour. Three-quarters of a cup of granulated sugar. 3/4 cup of brown sugar. I think it gives it a really good flavor. 1/2 teaspoon of salt. A cup of oatmeal. I use really good sort of Irish quick cooking oats. Whatever you have around is fine. This is what gives it all its flavor. 1/2 pound of butter, 2 sticks of butter, diced and into the mixer. Okay. I'm really looking for the butter and the flour and the oatmeal to be crumbly together. This is good right now. You can do this with your hands, but it'll take much longer. So I'm just going to put it right on top. It's going to be really good together, especially with homemade vanilla ice cream. I know some people like chocolate and some people like cakes, but me, I like fruit crisps, and this is my favorite one, apple crisp. It's going to bake for 350 degrees for about an hour, and it's going to make the house smell wonderful, and we're going to have a fabulous dessert.